Hi, and welcome to today's 4 Minute Mark. We are in Mark chapter 10, and Jesus is about to talk about divorce. The Pharisees wanted to test him, wanted to trip him up. Okay, so they ask, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? And chapter 10, verse 3. What did Moses command you? He replied. They said, Moses permitted a man to write a certificate of divorce and send her away. It was because of your hearts were hard that Moses wrote you this law, Jesus replied. But at the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man will leave his wife and be united to, leave his father and mother, will be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. When they were in the house again, the disciples asked Jesus about this. He answered, anyone who divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another man, she commits adultery. The practice in Jesus' day, very common practice, was that all you needed to do to divorce your wife was to say 3 times in public, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you. And that was it. She was out in the street with no protection, no family, nothing. And commonly they would do this because of what we would call today, irreconcilable differences, or we just don't get along anymore. But often, as is the case today, there was adultery involved. I see somebody I like better, so, then you say to your spouse, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you 3 times, and you can go to the one who's better. That's the situation that Jesus is talking about here. And he says that the only reason divorce exists, basically, is that people's hearts are hard. Okay? And God graciously, if we can say this, God graciously granted divorce so that you don't have people living together who hate each other and are fighting all the time and threatening one another and threatening one another's health. So Jesus says God permitted that because your hearts are hard, because you couldn't accept what God has in mind when he has marriage in mind. So Jesus says, so that was a stopgap that God gave you. Okay? But that's not what God has in mind when he talks about marriage. And then Jesus quotes the book of Genesis here about the two becoming one. And if you've been to many weddings, that's usually one of the things that we say, those that are presiding at the wedding. We will say, therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. The two are no longer two, but one. So the idea here is that God desires the people to stay together because in God's eyes they are one. And if God has declared something one, then we do not have the right to tear it apart. Okay, that's what Jesus is saying here. And he's talking again about what goes on in his society when he says, hey, if you marry somebody else, you're committing adultery. Okay. Again, we have to keep in mind what the whole Bible says about divorce. It's a very complicated subject. But let's keep in mind, first of all, what Jesus is emphasizing here, that it is God's will that a married couple stay together forever. Okay? And when divorce occurs, it is because of sin on some part. Okay? And because people's hearts are hard and they can't accept the grace of God, whatever. Okay? That's what he's saying. So we will pick up the subject of divorce again tomorrow. Bye-bye.